We are going to have two Nobel laureates speaking to us by video, and it's going to be live video presentations. The first talk is going to be by Professor Heckman, a Nobel Prize winner in economics in the year 2000. And he is currently a professor of economics at the University of Chicago. He is actually distinguished service professor of economics at the University of Chicago. If you want more details about his career, you can always find that either on the web, or if you look at the website of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, you'll find quite a lot of information about him. Professor Heckman, do you hear us?
Yes, I do.
Hello. Hi, how are you? And welcome. We are delighted that you are with us, and we look forward to hearing you. I think everybody here hears Professor Heckman well. Is that correct? Do you hear him well? All right. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
And I'm sorry I can't be with you. I have some conflicts here that require that I be in Chicago at this time. So it would be great at some time in the future to be able to visit Alexandria. So what I want to talk about today briefly is my own work that interfaces with the topic of your symposium. And I think a natural question that anybody in the room would ask is, why is an economist talking to your symposium? I mean, if I were a hardcore biologist, if I were doing work on genetics or had some particular advance in the structure of biology or neuroscience even, I think I might be apparently more on topic. But what I want to try to say today, briefly, I have a few minutes, I realize, is that there is a very tight connection between biology and economics, and it's one that's growing, and it's one that has both scientific purposes and one that also has policy implications. So let me describe each of those kinds of initiatives and what we're doing here at the University of Chicago and what we're doing more generally. I should point out that even though I'm at the University of Chicago and I'm a strong supporter of the research that's being done here, I'm also part of a general network called the Human Capital and Economic Opportunity Network, which has 400 people around the world. Unfortunately, nobody yet in Egypt, although we would welcome partnerships in Egypt. What is this network doing? It's putting together groups of people, not just economists, but groups of people in psychology, in neuroscience, in epidemiology, and in other fields to try to understand human development and human flourishing in the broadest sense of that term. And so what we want trying to do is understand the various aspects by which we can build flourishing lives. And to achieve that goal, we must draw on all subjects, and all subjects within I would say, the scholarship, the canon of scholarship, are relevant. And not just in a vague way, but in a very precise way. So let me just give you some examples of how they're relevant. So we have 6 working groups that look at things like the early effects of early childhood development on human development, that look at how we might measure skills, so evaluating schools and evaluating even individual students to make them productive and to make sure that we know what a good intervention might be for those children. But other topics that look at the economics of inequality, and that look at, for example, the early origins of inequality in health. And so the general theme, and there are other sessions, other groups as well, but those are the main topics, main groups that are relevant, I think, to today's discussion. And so we have ongoing conferences, and we'd love to hook up with the Bibliotheca Alexandrina and other groups in Egypt to think about participating in this broader agenda of creating more flourishing lives. So let me just give you some idea of what the nature of the body of ideas is. The first thing is to recognize, and what we study is the life cycle evolution of skills. And we want to understand how it is that people develop and what environments encourage maximal human development. And by maximal, I don't mean shaping people along a particular line or adopting a particular cultural perspective, but I mean giving people the opportunity to be what they can be. And I think that's very, very important. And it's very important across any political system and across any religious or geographical division. So what we're looking at is understanding the life cycle, evolution, the creation of skills. And what we're looking at is how we produce those skills and how those skills are expressed, how they're valued in labor markets, how they're valued in creating functioning, flourishing societies, and also in promoting health and promoting healthy lives. So what do we found? Well, the most obvious place to start, but not the place where we stop, is in the economics of education. For many years, the University of Chicago has been emphasizing what's called human capital. Human capital was once equated with schooling. It's a much broader concept than just schooling. But it consists of a bunch of ideas, a set of ideas that are associated with expanded capacities to function, if you will. So I may adopt some ideas from Amartya Sen's notions of capabilities, not looking so much at the political aspects, but of the personal expression aspects, the capacities to actually control one's life and to shape one's life. So these kinds of dimensions, I think, are really important and they're neglected. So let me just give you some examples of the kind of work that we're doing and the work that I think is really important and relevant even to your symposium. So we all know that education has profound effects on knowledge. And in terms of health and healthy lives, more educated people will be able to act on this information and more adaptable to the flow of ideas and to change. But what we also have come to understand is how education and learning per se actually affect the biology of human beings. So it used to be thought, well, we go to school, we acquire ideas, that somehow education is a very, very kind of a classroom experience, and the physiology and the biology were all ignored. Well, what we've come to understand is that there are real changes, and we measure those changes in multiple ways. One is how genes express themselves, and these has now been studied, not only how environments change gene expression, so-called epigenetics and related fields, but also the neuroscience, how basically we can see neuroscientific patterns change in the brain in response to learning. And this takes some of the early work of Eric Kandel on learning and the change in the brain from sea slugs really to human beings. This is an area of great research relevance. It's of great relevance to biology, but also of great relevance to economics. Why? Because we can see how things like poverty, environmental interactions with individuals literally change the brain and the way the brain is processing information and the way it's actually creating or not creating linkages and being able to respond to tasks and challenges that it may face. So we've come to have a much deeper understanding of how experience gets under the skin, and the set of experiences we consider are much broader than just education. It consists of parenting, for example. It consists of religious instruction. It consists of a variety of stimuli, which, if applied in a stimuli applied in beneficial ways, can promote not only an immediate achievement in terms of education or earnings or self-control, but also leave a trace in the biology of the human being that will last a lifetime and could affect beneficially or harmfully this the evolution of the person over the lifetime. And one thing we've also come to understand is that the early years play a very prominent role. And by that I mean the years even before the time, the environment that the mother brings into the womb to affect the child, even the preconditions before conception, but certainly during conception, those conditions have lifetime effects on what individuals can be and cannot be. So really, this is a very active interface where we're understanding the biology of human development. So that's one aspect that I think is very important. But we've also come to understand that health itself affects the acquisition of human capital, on schooling. So children that are, some obvious points are children who are ill, who have asthma, who suffer from various diseases, hookworm and the like, are children who are going to be much less likely to learn simply because they're distracted. They simply may not have the energy and the stamina to acquire any skills. So there's a direct effect of health on the acquisition of human capital and more generally the formation of skills. We also, in this framework of human capital and human development, are looking on health as an investment. And so health, it's not just schooling, it's not just building a road, building schools. Those are the kinds of traditional investments that people have thought about. But what we've come to understand is that health itself is an investment. And what can we do about health? And what do we know? The typical approach towards treating problems arising with health and promoting health, and this is true in the United States, it's true in the World Health Organization more generally. You look at many organizations in many countries around the world. Typically, the treatment, the approach to health is one of basically finding a problem, say the expression of a disease, finding a cure for that problem, building better hospitals and training better doctors. Now, I'm not going to say that's a bad idea. I think, of course, is a very good idea. But what we can add to that as an effective strategy is to actually think about the early life origins of the capabilities and capacities that build healthy, flourishing lives. Let me give you an example. We know that one important aspect of schooling, parenting, religious instruction, societal instruction, and various institutions within society are playing their own important roles. One of the important ways that these interventions operate is through promoting skills or personality traits, capabilities, if you will, that shape self-control, the ability to follow instructions given by health professionals, but also more generally, the ability to respond to environmental stimuli. So it's a question of how much individuals gain control over their own personal lives, how well they can shape their lives, including shaping their health. So if we build these skills, not just IQ, not just the standard measures of years of schooling, but if you look at much broader measures of skill or capabilities, we find that those skills, including personality skills, the ability to stay on task, the ability to postpone gratification, the ability to work with others, social and emotional skills that have frequently been neglected in discussions. Individuals with higher levels of those skills lead healthier, more productive lives. And so what we've come to understand is the dynamic synergism that appears between various hitherto isolated in analysis capacities. So we understand that health promotes learning, learning promotes health, and that essentially cognitive and non-cognitive skills both are very, very important. So when we measure performance of individuals, we measure the performance of schools, we want much broader inventories than just IQ tests, achievement tests, or PISA tests. I would just alert you to some recent developments at the OECD, which a new document that was produced, maybe not so new, 2014, December, a document that I wrote with several co-authors, which essentially modifies the agenda of the PISA program and suggests the importance not only of how well people do on achievement tests, the kind of paper and pencil tests that are widely used to evaluate schools, but also on personality traits and things that we actually can teach and can shape, and that actually help shape creative lives and are very effective in promoting health. Let me give you one example, a very specific example. We've studied recently and are continuing to study an early intervention program that appeared in the United States in North Carolina some 40 years ago now, some 45 years when this program was launched. This program was initially launched to try to promote parenting. So parenting by itself seems very far removed from health. And you say, well, okay, it's nice to have good parenting, but what does this have to do with health and biology? Well, it turns out it has a lot. Individuals who actually participated in this program, and some were randomized in, some were randomized out. These people were followed for a period of 35 years in this particular study that was published in the journal Science about 2 years ago. The children who received this enhanced parenting, they're all disadvantaged children, by the way, those children actually lead much healthier lives at age 35. And so when we look at this, what do I mean? We actually take measures. We have doctor readings of what exactly the skill, or the health capacities of these individuals are. So those people who got stimulation, enriched parenting early in their lives, actually were able to produce much lower blood pressure. So they much lower metabolic syndrome indicator, which is a precursor for diabetes, much healthier lives measured by multiple dimensions, much more good cholesterol, much less bad cholesterol, and so forth and so on. So if you put together, so this is very surprising until you recognize that the ingredient of the individual's own participation in creating his or her own health has been ignored. It's just not a matter of going to hospitals and having doctors look at you. It's also a matter of how the individual reacts to that information, takes care of themselves, manages their lives, does healthy activity or does not do healthy activity, say smokes versus not smokes, participates in healthy exercise, not. And over a lifetime, these matters accumulate so that more motivated children, more active children, not only more intelligent children, but also children, even with no greater intelligence, but more motivated, with greater self-control, lead much healthier lives. So what we've come to understand is that the creation of these skills, these capacities, if you will, have a very important role to play in shaping healthy lives over the whole life cycle. Because no person is more important in a person's life than that person themselves. And to have that person on board, being able to, I would say, control their own lives, have a sense of awareness, have a sense of participation in the larger society, can have huge effects. And we actually, since we're economists, we actually monetize some of these, at least some of us are economists, we monetize these benefits. And when we include the benefits that are inclusive of health, we get annual rates of return for each dollar invested or each Egyptian pound invested. Each unit value invested is getting a return of somewhere between 11 and 13% per annum. Per annum. You recognize that in 7 years or so, 6 years, a little more than 6 years, that would double the amount invested. And you take that over a whole lifetime. When you start with early child investments, the returns are enormous. The benefit cost ratios are enormous. So I guess I'm running out of time. I've scheduled for 15 minutes and I'm close to that. I'm a little over that. I would just say that I'm very pleased to participate in your symposium. I'd be very happy to send any supporting material if people are interested. It's too bad I don't have the capacity right now to give you my website, but if you just Google the Human Capital and Economic Opportunity Network, HCEO is the acronym for that. So if you look at the HCEO, the abbreviation, you'll find a very wide collection of papers that exactly amplify these themes. And we have conferences on a regular, ongoing basis, integrating epidemiology, medicine, pure bench biology and neuroscience with economics and education. It's an exciting new area, and it's an area that's very promising in the sense that we can improve health using yet another dimension, not just spending money on disease once it occurs, but preventing disease and preventing a lot of problems early on. And as a result, instead of fighting a battle after the battle has started and after the problem was manifest, making sure it never starts in the first place. So thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Mr. Heckman, thank you. Thank you Thank you very much, Professor Heckman. This is really quite an exciting talk. Will you take a few questions from the audience?
Oh, absolutely. I
All
look
right.
forward to
Let me just begin by just, I'm very glad that you mentioned the issue of the links between poverty and nutrition to the development of children.
Yes.
But has there been any work related to what you have said, examining this issue, linking poverty and lack of nutrition to the newly born children in the first 2 years? Because it appears that there is a lot of damage that occurs to the brains of children living in poverty during the first 1,000 days or the first 2 years after their birth. Is there anything that you can refer to in your studies that really address this issue of
Yes,
brain
there's
development?
a very large body of evidence, not just by me, by many scholars around the world. And these would be economists. It would also consist of people who are biologists and neuroscientists. A lot of work suggesting that children growing up in extreme poverty, and I mean extreme poverty, have their brains actually affected in long-lasting ways. In extreme conditions, we've seen the study of the Romanian infants, which has gone around the world. Charles Nelson and his associates have studied this as well as others. And they've studied the consequences of poverty and deprivation. It's interesting, though, that the word poverty here has to be defined in a very careful way when you're talking about children. It's not so much a matter of financial poverty. It's not so much a matter of just fewer dollars or fewer pounds on the table. I think what's relevant is also the poverty of not having a child be read to by a parent and interacted with by the parent. So, for example, in the Romanian infants case, these children were put in orphanages. They were basically given no stimulation. When you look at what happens to their brains without any stimulation, they get food, so they get nutrition, but nonetheless, those children are very impaired in their lifetime unless they're adopted out at a very early age. And so we find lasting effects of poverty of this time. But there's another kind of poverty, and this is in countries, for example, that are extremely poor. Micronutrients play a huge role. So, for example, we know iron deficiency, which is true in many parts of the world, even in places like Western China, certainly true in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, particularly pronounced, parts of Brazil, and many parts of the world in Southeast Asia and so forth, Nepal. What we found is, and what has been found, is these deficiencies in micronutrients impair IQ. And some of these micronutrients are truly amazing. For example, vitamin A, which is very cheap to provide, very cheap. Absence of vitamin A in the diet can lead to permanent blindness if a child does not see, if it's not by age 1. So and the same would be true of cataracts. If cataracts aren't removed from the child's eyes, it's very difficult because the early years play a fundamental role in creating the capabilities of those individuals. So micronutrient supplements are very important. But let me tell you about a study that I think is highly relevant and is influencing world policy today. There's a study done in Jamaica by Sally Grantham McGregor and her colleagues. Sally Grantham McGregor lived in Jamaica for many years. She's currently now at the University College London in London, England. But she did a study looking at disadvantaged children in a Jamaican slum. This was a study that started some 25, 30 years ago. And she was interested exactly in the question of what you would do. So disadvantaged children had very low levels of nutrition. So she provided supplements to those children. But in the course of it, she also asked, was it food alone? So, some religious texts say, a man cannot live by bread alone. Well, I would say that children cannot develop by nutrients alone. And so her study actually found that when children were given some parenting stimulus along with nutrition, Only in that circumstance were there lasting effects of the program. By lasting effects, we're talking about effects that lasted into age 25 and age 30. So we actually did a randomized trial in Jamaica. We followed these children up until age 25, and we could see that those who had both the nutritional supplement and the parenting stimulation were the ones who actually succeeded. Nutrition alone, although important for parading the biology of the child, did not do the job in terms of creating a full flourishing life. We haven't yet looked at the health consequences, although that's under preparation. So I think that we do have studies, and we know that poverty can be very, very extreme, have very extreme consequences on the development of children. But I would just go back and repeat myself and say, what does poverty mean here? We're so used to, in world trade and world discussions, to say, poverty is lack of income, and therefore we give more income, we reduce poverty. Well, in some sense, tautologically, it's true. But I think when we look at development of children, the poverty is really one of creating an environment that nourishes the child, that scaffolds the child. And I think it's that kind of scaffolding and interaction which I think is extremely important. And the evidence now from many studies, I've cited the Jamaican study, but there are many, many studies, not with this long follow-up, but nonetheless that point to the same picture, that parenting is very important as well as nutrition. But at a certain level, nutrition is critical. There's a great story about Nepal that I think I have to tell. For many years, people thought that the Nepalese had a certain kind of hump in their back, and that was this genetic trait. So Tenzing Norgay, who helped Sir Edmund Hillary climb and climbed with him, probably led him on top of the Mount Everest, had this typical hump. And so this is believed to be a feature of the Nepalese genetics. Well, some doctors went in, some epidemiologists, and they found there was substantial iodine deficiency in the diet of many Nepalese. The hump is gone. And the reason why it's gone is now, because of interventions, those children are getting iodine, and they're getting some of the other micronutrients. So the micronutrients play a role, and macronutrients. Calories matter as well. So I don't want to deny that, but I think we have a much richer understanding of exactly what are effective interventions. And it's an ongoing process to try to understand exactly which features of those interventions are really important. And but I do know that the body of work points towards parenting and stimulation. So that's a long answer to your question, but it was a complicated question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will take a couple of questions. Anybody who wants to ask a question? Yes, please. There's a young lady here who wants to ask you a question.
Thank you for your fruitful speech. I'd like to ask you something. You said that skills can prevent some diseases, and nutrition can affect autoimmune diseases or not. Can we expect that if we prevent nutrition deficiency, can we prevent genetic susceptible disease? For example, vitiligo is a genetic susceptible disease and autoimmune as well. If we can make a linkage between the nutrition to the patients and to the genetic factor to the genetic content, can we prevent the disease by fixing their deficiency in nutrition? In specific vitamins or proteins.
Well, that's a great point, and I think the answer is we have some evidence indicating what you're saying is true. I don't want to come across and saying all disease will be cured, and I'm not trying to sell snake oil here or any particular product. But I think what we do know is that proper change in environment can have major consequence on disease. So I mentioned an indirect effect, giving people more iron, raising IQ, and with that, the awareness that they would have about what preventative measures they may take to avoid disease, to prevent infection, and so forth and so on. So that's an immediate channel. But there are other channels as well. And let me give you one channel that came not from a study of human beings, but from a study of rhesus monkeys. It may sound bizarre to study rhesus monkeys, but rhesus monkeys have many of the same genes that we have, And we can study them in a way that we can't study human beings. We can experiment with them, and we can also take veterinary records in a controlled circumstances in a way that's very hard to do in human populations. So what we found, and I think the evidence is quite clear on, is that if we changed the nature of the environment in which the monkeys are reared, so this was a case of giving the monkey a mother, or somebody who's acting as a mother surrogate. In other words, providing an environment of mothering and stimulation, versus taking the monkey, putting the monkey in isolation, or just rearing it with a group of peers, having mutual peer rearing but without a mother figure in their lives. We can actually see two things. One, the genes, the gene expression, I should say, of the monkeys is altered. So we have a paper that's in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that shows that. But then we have a follow-up paper that shows that those diseases, those modified genes, do change either positively or negatively the immune system. And we can then see in the veterinary records the incidence of much greater disease among those monkeys reared in isolated environments. In fact, I mean, these studies were actually pioneered by Steve Sumi at the National Institute of Health, but we worked with him. And so we've relied on his studies and enhanced those studies by using longitudinal methods. So there is evidence that the environments can play a role. We also know that, for example, in some of the work on mice that Moshe Ziff and his colleagues have done at the university, at McGill University, originally at Montreal University, they've actually played a very powerful role showing that changed environmental conditions in the way that, call it mothering, can literally change the way the genes are expressed. And those genes can actually affect the behaviors, and including the behaviors of the health behaviors. So there is some evidence that these early life conditions matter. Some of them would involve micronutrients at a certain level. I mentioned the question about vision and vitamin A, intelligence and IQ. There's a lot more to be done about looking at the neuroscientific traces of these elements. But we do know that they play a major role. So this is, I think, an effective avenue for thinking about preventing disease and giving richer lives to these children. But precise genetic mechanisms for each of these interventions have yet to be fully evaluated. It's an area of promising research, and it indicates an approach to policy, but there's work to be done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just the last one. Anybody at the back, one of those young students or young graduates? No? Yes, over there. Very quick.
Hello, I'm a physician and interested in the epidemiological point of view and connecting economics with health. And I'm asking about the parenting program that you mentioned. If there is a project or a research conducting by now to discuss the or to find the relation between applying these parents programs with in a very large scale in the countries which are supplied by WHO programs that support the child and motherhoods, for example, the child and motherhood health, or the child health, or other specific diseases preventive programs. There are specific programs or research conducting to search these points right now?
Well, you're looking for specific large-scale implementations of these programs?
Yes, in which, in a way to predict the effect, the good effect in over the society.
Well, see, what's interesting is then that only recently have people been studying this link between parenting and education and long-term health. As I say, much of the work in health economics in the past has typically been about treatment, like reducing costs of treatment, thinking about efficiencies, for example, in the US context, the Affordable Care Act. What we're talking about here now is the developmental origin of health. And this is a new area. There are people actively working on this. And it's understood in some countries. Like in China, I believe there's a fair amount of interest now. I know there is. The China Development Research Foundation, with which I've been working, has now implemented programs and is implementing programs all around China, partly to improve nutrition, but also to increase parental stimulation. So understanding the wisdom from the Jamaican study, a number of studies have now been put in place and programs, public programs in China. And this template is being emulated in other countries in the world. The country of Colombia as well. President Santos has actually strongly endorsed this. In Chile, President Bachelet has strongly endorsed this. So there are public policy areas where this wisdom is starting to be implemented. But going to scale creates a whole new set of questions. The evidence I've been talking about have been from pilot programs. And the question is always whether or not a pilot program can be effectively taken to scale. But there are programs. There is certainly growing awareness. The IADB recently produced a new book just summarizing some of the main evidence. The Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences routinely publishes stories, scholarly studies and popularizations of the studies. And so there's a growing awareness in public policy community. And certainly the World Health Organization is aware of this. But some of these large organizations are sometimes very slow to change and to adapt to the newer thinking. And, you know, people are trained. I mean, the argument is frequently made, you know, that the progress of science is made one death at a time. I'm not looking for the death of anybody, but I think sometimes ideas proceed a little too slowly. This is an area where we actually have some pretty good knowledge. Now, there's always room for exaggeration, though. And I think some of the organizations have been correct in arguing, well, you know, let's not go overboard. So, for example, in the evidence on early life factors, we know that severe deprivation has negative consequence. We know that. Severe deprivation, parenting, nutritional, and even stressful environments where a lot of the parents are arguing, there are gunshots outside, children are growing up during a civil war, or seeing violent conditions, seeing their mothers raped, or various kinds of violent conditions. We know that those are very negative on the development of the child. But we also know, and this is an interesting thing about health, there's resilience. And so as a result, we might want to say, okay, at what point do we really want to say the interventions are highly effective, and at what stage in the life cycle? So we know if you give up smoking and can successfully give that up for at least 10 years or so, there's only a residual trace in terms of its effects on disease. So there is a possibility of resilience. So I'm not saying that the early years aren't important, they are. But the later years are also important. And we know that in terms of the maturation of the prefrontal cortex, the work from neuroscience, aspects of self-control and regulation are still being developed into the early 20s. And we know that this is a very important avenue and area. So adolescent mentoring and parenting, like surrogate parenting programs, can play a huge role. But we're just beginning to really actively understand that. We know that we can prevent children from taking risks and making wiser judgments. But the long-term developmental consequences of this for health are just beginning to be pursued. But it's an avenue of great interest to me and to many others.
Thank you.
And I think many public organizations, many public institutions, like in the United States, the Brookings Institution, and the world organizations like the World Bank and the IADB have actually actively promoted these policies.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Heckman. Thank you.
Okay.
Very much enjoyed your talk and also answering the questions that we asked. Thank you. Well, our next speaker is Dr. Mehta, John Mehta. Dr. Mehta is currently a senior astrophysicist at NASA. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in the year 2006. You have again his CV, detailed CV you will find on the website of the BA if you want to look at what his huge accomplishments. But he is going to, John, do you hear us?
Yes, I hear you. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, John, I was just referring to your CV, which is on the website of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. But I noticed that you got your bachelor's degree in physics from Swarthmore College.
Yes, indeed.
Well, this is where my daughter studied.
Ah, what a small world we are in.
But yeah, but she did economics and we didn't do physics. Well, welcome, John. We are very, very delighted that you are here with us. And the title of Dr. Mercer's talk is The History of the Universe from the Beginning to the End. Where did we come from and where can we go? I think these are really exciting questions. All of us are very anxious to hear the answers to those. John, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, thank you. I need to share my screen with you so you can see everything. So let's try this. And now I will see if I can show you my PowerPoint.
We see intergalactic dust.
Is that working? Can you see me? Can you see my screen, I mean?
Yeah, I see, yeah.
Okay, well, I don't have all the answers to the beginning of the universe or the end, but I know you're here to think about long-term planning and civilization. So I thought I would talk about that as much as I can, illustrated by what we have been learning about the history of the universe. So what I'm showing you here on the screen is a picture of the James Webb Space Telescope, which is NASA's most ambitious scientific project yet. We are currently completing the observatory and planning for launch in October of 2018 to follow up on the discoveries that the Great Hubble Space Telescope has made, to learn everything that we can about the history of the universe from the origin of galaxies and stars and planets to the possibilities of life both here in the solar system and elsewhere around other stars. So I think I like to think about the billion-year challenge. We have, according to astronomy, approximately 1 billion years. That's a very, very, very long time before the sun gets too bright and we're no longer able to live here on planet Earth. So that's a vast amount of time to plan ahead. We need to arrange for food, water, energy, minerals, for good health for all of our citizens. We need to have good government and organization, and we'd like to preserve some kind of civilization and culture for the entire duration of humanity here on Earth, or whatever may come after us. So what do we know? How do we know it? Well, I like to start with this picture today because this is a picture of something called the Eagle Nebula. It was a picture taken on the ground in South America with the European Very Large Telescope using infrared light to examine a cloud of gas and dust and new stars. So this is a place where stars are just being born today, and it's a reminder of our history. So I'll show you a little bit more later. But we know from observations that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old, but it is still forming new stars and new planets even as we speak today. So the universe is a very interesting place, full of wonderful surprises, including this beautiful cloud, which looks very different when we use infrared light to examine it. The Hubble Space Telescope was built to mostly observe light that you can see with your eye. somewhat shorter wavelengths of ultraviolet, which of course you can feel and you can get a sunburn from, a little bit longer wavelengths, but at very much longer infrared wavelengths, the Hubble cannot see because the Hubble itself is glowing with emission of infrared light. So my next chart here, I show you something that's a very interesting part of history for us. This is a star which exploded in AD 1054, not even 1,000 years ago. And this is a picture taken with the Hubble Space Telescope showing the material coming out of that great stellar explosion. This is very important for us because this is an example of how the chemical elements of the Earth were liberated from stars. As we know, the Big Bang, the early part of the universe, did not contain carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, aluminum, silicon, and all the other things that make up planet Earth. So where did they come from? They came from stars like this one, which exploded or gradually sent their material back out into space when they were old and no longer could support the continuing process of being an ordinary star. So this happened not long ago, and fairly far away, and this is called a supernova. And it turned out to be scientifically interesting as well as beautiful to look at. Here is a reminder of our own history, beginning in AD 1609. Galileo made a small telescope, and there's an example of a modern version of it there. And with it showed that the ancients from Greek times had not understood everything, and this is not really a surprise, but I show here Galileo's drawings of the surface of the moon. He was the first one to really be able to show and record the fact that the moon is not a perfect sphere, but actually has mountains that can be seen quite well with even Galileo's small telescope. So only 407 years ago, we began modern scientific astronomy, and it was in many ways the beginning of scientific civilization. Not really, but a very important step. So here is a summary of the history of the universe, as some of these things I've said to you already. About 13.8 billion years ago, and that's American billion, 1,000 million, the universe was very young, very hot, very dense, and was expanding quite rapidly. For many billions of years, the expansion continued and other stars were formed, other stars exploded and liberated those chemical elements, as I showed you in that picture a moment ago. So only 4.6 billion years ago, the solar system was formed with planets and many other things that were left over, like asteroids and comets. So hundreds of millions of years went past. Eventually, the oceans were formed, possibly by comets colliding with the Earth, and of course, asteroids as well, making gigantic craters, some of which can still be found today. Many of them were disastrous for life here on Earth, but at any rate, about 3.8 billion years ago, life originated here on Earth, and we have fossil records of that, which we can date with radioactive isotope technology today. So that happened, and so, by the way, we are all descended from some very early life forms. The plants, the animals, the bacteria, the fungi, all the tiniest things and the largest things are all probably descended from a single initial life form. So we're all related to one another, to the things that we eat, and to the things that will eat us when we are gone. So about 500 million years ago, life began here on land. There was a lovely coincidence that there's just enough water to fill up most of the ocean, but not enough water to cover up the continents. So we do have land here on Earth, and other places in the solar system that have oceans do not also mostly have land. So a long, long, long time passed, almost all of the history of the universe passed, and then about 100,000 years ago, modern human beings seem to have what we now can call a cognitive revolution, where they were able to imagine things, to talk with each other, and suddenly to roam over the entire planet Earth. It took us a very short time to go all the way from our probable origins in southern Africa all the way to Australia. Took a little bit longer to get to the Americas because we had ice in the way, but eventually the entire world has been settled by people who are different from all of the other creatures that we share the earth with, because we can speak and imagine in ways that we don't think that they can do. So about 10,000 years ago, we had the next great revolution. We learned how to farm, and in some ways we became slaves of our own invention, because now we had to go and plant things and feed the animals that we wanted to eat eventually. Many, many more years passed. About 500 years ago, the printing revolution, as they call it, is the previous equivalent of the internet revolution. This enabled scientific knowledge to be transferred very rapidly around the world in a way that had been completely impossible when all books had to be copied by hand. About 100 years ago, Einstein's an example that we started what I call the physics revolution, and suddenly we had extraordinarily rapid advance in every kind of engineering using all the kinds of physics that Einstein and his friends started to advance. Only about 20 years ago, what I call the cell phone revolution, now that the entire world is connected, as you know, by electronics. So there's, within a few years, I think everyone on planet Earth will be able to talk to everyone else within moments. So this is an opportunity which we now have. Today we have another revolution continuing, which many of you are working on, what I call the bioinformation revolution. So I now invite you to work with us all to plan for the next billion years, about 50 million generations of human beings. So what do I know about nature? Well, I mentioned already that all living things are probably descended from a single common ancestor cell. We all remarkably use the same genetic code of DNA to control the growth of those cells into living things. Another remarkable fact about nature is that nobody is ever alone. Everything is completely interconnected. Needless to say, everything is struggling to exist and to reproduce. If it were not doing so, it would not be here. So nature is extremely ingenious and uses every possible strategy to guarantee its own survival without any particular sense of morality. It does what it has to do to continue to survive. So other things about nature, one thing that astronomers know is that everything is unstable given enough time. Even the solar system will eventually change. We also notice that life has been here now continuously for about 3.8 billion years. So no matter how many catastrophes have occurred to planet Earth through climate changes, volcanoes, poisoning events from those volcanoes, asteroid collisions, and so forth, we are all still alive because something continues. We know from observations that there are unintended consequences for anything that you think you are going to do. We know, as Malthus pointed out, that things grow until they can no longer do so. Something we're now more appreciative of than before is that in this huge population of 7 billion people on Earth, there is always someone who is very unusual, but can do something extremely good or extremely bad. We don't know where those people will be, but of course, 7 billion people is enough. So nature doesn't care whether I like this answer or not, but it's remarkable how far we have gotten anyway. Human society, I think, is extremely complex and can easily break down, as we see in daily examples, but nevertheless, humans are very resilient and ingenious, and we continue on and survive anyway. We know that short-term systems, like economic systems, can be broken because when they've been optimized for any particular purpose, they are then become fragile. We know when we try to regulate ourselves by passing laws and regulations that, of course, people are extremely ingenious and they try to avoid them. But this should not be a surprise. As we're planning our social work in the future, we need to understand that that's just a natural phenomenon too. So instability. I mentioned earlier that nothing lasts forever. We are here because natural instability, gravity pulled the cosmic original gas clouds together to make stars. Those stars exploded, as I showed you. We should be appreciative of those catastrophes because we wouldn't be here without them. Similarly, the continents have moved, the volcanoes have polluted, earthquakes and tsunamis have happened, asteroids hit the Earth, and of course we wouldn't be here without them, especially the asteroid that probably wiped out the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago. So things happen to the continents and the ice as well. The sea level goes up and down. It wasn't so very long ago that most of Europe was covered with ice, as well as most of North America. That has gone away by itself, but now, of course, we are changing that even more rapidly as we use up carbon fuel. So natural things have been growing until they couldn't. They have been changing their environments. We are not the only ones. Elephants uproot the trees, plants make oxygen. All of these things have changed the world very rapidly. People, by the way, are very fast in our effect on things because we have culture and communication, and that's much quicker than evolution and geology. So in biology, a few surprises, to me at any rate. We now know that every cell is actually a tiny digital computer with instructions. It has on and off switches and is available for modification by humans. Many of you, I think, will be working on DNA modification and control. Even bacteria contain digital records of the viruses that have attacked them before. It's an extraordinarily complicated situation for cells, but they do what they can, and they have, over time, become extremely capable and competent to do what they do. What we didn't expect until quite recently is that human intervention is possible even in the genetic engineering using the internal repair tools that cells already have. So there's a huge opportunity for us there. People are hypersocial. We are always obsessed with our friends, our neighbors, our enemies. We are ready to talk about anything. We're ready to join groups and form teams for any purpose. We are different from the other animals in that we are able to talk about things that do not exist and make plans for the future. If we want something, we can plan ahead. We are very capable of learning from one another and remembering. We write things down, we keep them in libraries, and I think it's a thrill to be talking to the Library of Alexandria, one of the wonders of the ancient world, and now being repopulated with all of the information of today. Human beings are predators. We grew up learning how to hunt, even though our other cousins in the trees, the chimpanzees and the gorillas, are much more likely to be vegetarian most of the time. We are very good hunters, which means we're always thinking about how to gain some kind of advantage. This is a sort of natural force that is the basis of human progress as well as human problems. So no surprise there. So there are huge numbers of opportunities based on the fact that we have so many people here. If there were only one of us, we would not get very far very fast. But with 7 billion of us, we will find everything that's possible to find. If there's one way to do something, we will find it. If there's no law of nature against it, we will be able to build it. If people want it, we will figure out a way to sell it. We will make mistakes. If there's a way to make a mistake, we will certainly make that mistake. But somehow we will always get what we want. So it used to be said after the American Apollo program, if we can land a man on the moon, why can we not do other things? So actually, there's no real limit to what we can do. It's just a matter of what do we want to do. So I'm very glad to know that you're having a conference to think about what do we want to do. So energy. We know that energy is a very important issue for us. I remind people that what we really just need to do is bring down the price of renewable energy. We have free nuclear power available from the sun every day, and it's going to be available for the next billion years. So as long as we can learn how to collect that energy, we can do whatever we want. If we just need to bring down the price of it, and miracles can happen. Of course, the way that we're currently avoiding doing this is we're burning up carbon and fuels, coal and oil, and changing our climate rather rapidly. I don't know what we're going to do. but we are going to have to deal with that. I'd like to come to what do we do next? Voluntary organizations have been a natural phenomenon for hundreds of thousands of years. So we have friendships, we have families, we build libraries, we form scientific societies to look for ways to make progress. Athletic teams, corporations are even voluntary societies. And in peacetime, I believe that governments can be considered to be voluntary organizations. They aren't always at peace, of course, so then maybe it's less voluntary. But I like the example of the American structure that we currently have, and here is an example of a government as a voluntary organization. People said to themselves that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So there's my example of a voluntary organization, that governments should be deriving their powers from the people that are being governed. At the end of the document, our founders pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to make this new American states come alive as a new government. So it took quite a few years and a lot of fighting, as it has taken for many other great progress events in our history. So just to wind up by thinking about how far we can go in the very long term, we already see that there are robots everywhere on Earth, that we want to have them. They are drilling holes in the bottom of the ocean to retrieve oil and natural gas. We have them roaming around on the planets or orbiting around the planets. So we have been extraordinarily successful about robotic construction and exploration. For space travel, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to go very far without the help of very, very powerful robotic capabilities. We need to breathe, we need to be protected from cosmic rays, and so we can certainly get to Mars and travel to Mars and perhaps colonize Mars if we want to. In the very long-term future, I think we will probably have robotic intelligence. It's not coming as fast as some people think, but it's coming because people are working so very hard on it. And if I believe, in my own opinion, that if we really want to do something, we will, then we will be able to build very smart robots. However, I don't think we're going to be able to travel in person to the nearest stars. The distances are just too far away. So even robots will probably not want to go all that far. So let me wind up, and we'll be happy to have some discussion and questions about these opinions. Thank you very much for thinking about my thoughts.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mehta, for this very interesting talk. We are running out of short of time, and we can have only one question. Any question? I don't see anything. Okay. Well, thank you once again, Dr. Mehta, for your talk. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming, and